Oh! Soldering irons. Not so many years ago, they looked like this. Pretty big, mains controlled. This is a pretty cheap one, but you might have a sort of temperature control there. And then the TS100 came along, and for a long time we accepted this as a soldering iron. This is my one, the OLED went, so I couldn't use it anymore. But people copy that design, so Secure bought out this. This is the SQ001. And the one I use now, which is the S99, which comes in this little kit, has 4 tips, runs off USB-C, very cheap, and is what I use at the moment. It works very well. Then I got an email from someone from KAiWEETS, I think that's how you pronounce it, and they make a soldering iron as well. It's called the KETS02, this is the kit. And they sent me a message saying, would you like to review this? But I looked at it and said, well, it doesn't look dissimilar from this, but it's a bit more expensive. I don't want to put out the same review of saying, well, this does everything, but it's more expensive. So I asked them what was unique about it, what would make someone buy it over this. And they said it heats up really quickly. So do these. But they asked me to take a look, and they were confident that if I compared it to another soldering iron, I would think it's better. And whether that's right or wrong, I really do respect a company that is like happy with like, yeah, put it against something, will be better. So let's go and close up, let's see what's in the box, and then we'll put it to the test. Okay, so let's find out what is in the box. Well, there's another box. There's some instructions. This is a UK plug, which is 65 watts and got a USB-C in to power it. And here we have the iron itself, and we've got a top for it as well, just in case you want to carry it around, I guess. Back in the box, what have we got? Well, we've got a USB-C to USB-C lead for power. We've got one of these little soldering rests, which are almost ubiquitous with these kits. And then we've got, wow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tips, which is quite a lot. So I have spotted something I like on this more than the Secure, and that's about how the tips go in. And the Secure is very easy. Pull it out and you push it back in and it's good to go. The only problem is when I've been cleaning the tip with like my little metal thing to try and get the bits off, dabbing that in, occasionally, I don't know how, but it just seems to slightly pull out and then the temperature goes crazy. I mean, it's easy to fix, you just find something and push it back in like that, but it's kind of a little bit annoying. But on this guy, what you've got is this unscrews, you put your tip in, it goes down to there, and then this guy goes back on. So you've got absolutely no chance at all of losing that tip. And I also like the fact that you can put the top on with the tip, so if you just need to carry around that and not bother with the rest of the tips, which are here, that's all good. Don't get any storage case or anything to carry these around in, so that's the one slight downside, I guess. Okay, so why don't we turn this thing on and have a look at the settings. First off, I love this USB-C cable. It's really thick and chunky feeling, as the ends are. I've plugged it in its own power adapter, and basically it turns on and it tells us that if we press the left button, she'll press that's the heating. If we press both buttons, we go on to the setting, and there's not much there. There's brightness, so you can make the OLED brighter or less bright. We can calibrate, we can look at the temperature unit, so our friends in the US can use Fahrenheit if they want to. Sleep time, so how long this will take before it sort of shuts down, just in case you leave it on. Oops, go out. Sleep temperature, child lock, handheld. Then you've got voltage select. By default it'll be taking 20 volts out of this. You can run it on less, but I don't see why you'd want to. And back to brightness again, so if we come out of that. With these ones you can run an XT60 into the USB. Can you do that with this one? I mean, it doesn't say so, so I'm a bit suspicious about doing that. Let's turn it on and see how long it takes to warm up. So it should be about 8 seconds before it can actually burn something. It's up to 300 degrees, the end is smoking. I'm guessing it's a new end. Bit pongy. and in this you can then set the units up to 420. I normally solder about 400ish. When it's on, the other things you can see here is the set temperature, which is 400 degrees, and the amount of volts you've got coming in there, which is 20. It says it likes to run at 380. This is normal operating temp, so let's do that. And then let's turn it off, and it will cool down. I'd love to see the temperature as it's cooling, because then I'd know if it was safe to touch it or not. And that is generally one of the things the Sequoia will do. So while we've got it here, why not plug it in and see what this thinks of it? Because one thing we want to do is have a bit of a race. We want to see how quickly this one will go up to 400. Again, we've got all the information on the screen. The current temp, even though it's not on, 23 degrees, should set to 400. We're on USB-C and 20 volts. I think it's hold down left. Goes to work temperature. And it goes up to temp that quickly. And crucially, if we shut it down, that stops, but it still reports the temperature. So we know, don't put your hands on it because it's at 350 degrees or so. I don't know how long that took compared to the other. I'll put a timer on so we can actually see. At the moment, I kind of like the chunkiness of this. I like this rubberized silicone thing they've got here, which seems to make it a little bit easier to hold. This thing's a little bit more dainty, but again, good for intricate work if you're not holding that much. I mean, arguments can be made for both of them. I'll actually go off and do some soldering now because I've been holding off a few jobs knowing that I wanted to look at this and do some real world tests with it. Okay, this is my little Darwin FPV quad. Little foldable quad, had a GPS, should have flown great, but the GPS kept dropping out. And what I mean by that is it kept going completely rather than just losing satellites. Now this has an ELRS SPI receiver, which I think adds extra load to the CPU, and it's my guess that the CPU is going and it's dropping the GPS sometimes. So I thought I'd put a proper receiver in this. And I've got a few of these Radiomaster RP1s ready to go, which isn't a particularly easy job because there's a lack of a ground. You see over here we've got T1R1 S-Bus 5 volt, 3 volt. So perhaps we use the ground here because there's another 2 grounds in there that are kind of buried. Now I'm going to use my microscope for this. Not that my eyes are that bad, it's more that I can show you pretty good close-ups and film using this guy.
Okay, I'll zip through this quick because I'm sure you all know how to solder. I put some flux on and then I tinned my flight controller, the T1, R1 and the 5 volt. Next I added some flux to the receiver, then tinned up those pads. Tinned the end of the wires that I was going to connect to them, and then soldered all those wires in place. Looks very shaky when you zoom it in a lot. Okay, so with those ends in, I then start attaching these to the flight controller, sometimes not showing the view because I'm doing a mixture of looking in the screen and directly, but that's what they look like. And then I just had to put this ground on top of another ground to finish things off.
Okay, so you can see the receiver in there, that's the antenna there. I've just set my bind phrase, and if we go into Betaflight now, you see we're on serial UART and we've got good things happening, so all good. So the real test with this is going to be in the flight to see if its GPS stays connected. I'll test that in a separate video. For now, this is folding up and going back in this little velvet bag. Okay, this is the other quad. This is the Lava X with the Emacs Open IPC in there. This has an old FreeSky S-Bus receiver. So problem being that the receive is on an inverted receive, and the actual receive pin I want is that one right there next to that blue wire, and that's the TX pin there. What a pain. I'm going to try and film this one using my webcam pointing down, and I'm going to need to use, I think, a smaller head of this. If we look at how we're going to get into there, it's a touch big. Okay, I'm just going to use the bigger tip to just tin the easy to get one, and then we'll go in and work on the other one. This is of course up to temp. Got a bit of flux on the joint. Yeah, happy with that. What I'm intending to do is reuse the wires that are there, most of them at least. I have to desolder this yellow wire. Okay, so that one can, I suppose that one can go on the one I've just lifted up actually. And then what I'll do is I'll cut the receiver wire short and re-plumb that into Express LRS receiver. Okay, well I just started letting this cool down and I thought to myself, actually I want to tin up my receiver and the wires I've got there and put the wire on that's going to connect to that one, so I might do that with the slightly bigger one. So this is yellow as TX going to RX, so this one has to be RX. Okay, so that gives us this guy tinned up and ready to go. That's connected, and I now have to get that horrifically small one there. But let's join these on to the receiver while we can. Okay, right, now what I have to do is figure out how long I want that. So I'm going to switch this off and wait for some minutes so I can put on the small one and do the tricksy bit. Okay, that's all connected. All connected there except for this one, which has to go right into there, which is the tricky bit to do, and hence the thinner soldering tip. Okay, so we've gone with the very thin tip. Got a little bit of flux on there, so now I'm going to try and go in and do this slightly delicate little bit of work. Bit of a burn off it at the moment because it's the first time the tip's in. I always find a problem with these tips that the solder is never just quite on the end of the tip, so I can never quite get it in the right place. Yeah, I like that. You can just see that blob, which is on its own and not shorting anything else. Okay, I think I'm happy with that, but we'll plug it in and see. Okay, there's the coil and receiver, yet to be held down. And again, if we twiddle the sticks, all is good. I did actually have to re-flash this to get it to work, and that's because when I flashed it with 4.5 the first time, I did it for S-Bus, and so CRSF wasn't there, so I had to re-flash it just to get CRSF working. But yeah, I just basically get a few zip ties and get the antenna and this down properly, and we can take that for a fly. Okay, so I'm happy on small things, but what about bigger joints, like putting XT60 cables on ESCs or doing motors? Now this ESC's died, so I want to see if I can desolder this, and you can see what a mess this is because I just cannot get the tips to put decent heat through it and keep the heat. So what I often do is end up resorting to this thing. This is my old one, and it doesn't go particularly hot, but it seems to manage to keep the heat through so you can like melt the whole thing. So I'm going to try it on the new one with a big tip, just to see if I can desolder this decently. Okay, all set up and ready to go. I always tend to use my magnifying lenses even on a big joint because my eyes just don't work that well if I'm getting closer. I'm going to try it with this tip first, as opposed to the sort of the chisel tip, mostly because it was about the same size as the one I've got on my old iron. So I want to see if it would get hot enough to do the melty. Yeah, so let's give it a go, find out. If you can hear a noise, I've got a fan running as well, which sort of pushes the smoke out of the way. Anyway, turning on. And I may well turn the temperature up. Temperature's at 400. Let's put a blob on and see what happens. Well, it took it off. It struggled a little bit, but it did do the melt, which is good. try to get the other one. I might just zip it up, might as well go all the way up to 420. It's pretty much about keeping the heat there though, rather than having it hotter. So this is quite a big joint. It immediately starts to melt the top bit, but it seems like it can just about do it. If we just keep it in place, yeah, it's managed it. Let's just see if we can tie this up over there. Yeah, this is acting a lot more like this guy, which is very cool. Let me get this out. Can I do it without burning my hands? I got one out. Yeah, I've got to say, this is the first soldering iron of this type where I've been able to melt through something like that in one. Normally they go in a bit and then everything seems to stop and they lose heat. This has worked much better. I'm just going to turn this back down to 380. See if I can find a really thick piece of cable, wire, to see if I can tin one of the ends nicely. Alright, found this series cable I got years ago, and one of these joints on the XT60, one of those connectors is completely wrong and won't work. So if we snip through that. Okay, this is 12 AWG gauge wire, so let's see if we can tin it and it will wick through the entire thing, or will it stop? Quite confident at this point. Well, it's starting to go. Well, it definitely went through. It left a bit of a blob there, which we can clean up. Wow, that's well and truly tinned all the way through. Very good. Now, I did ask KAiWEETS about if you could use an XT60, and they said, yeah, it's DC up to 24 volts. And if I just turned it over and read the back, I would have actually seen that. So they don't supply one, but here's the one I've got from my other iron. So let me plug that in quick. So I've got it plugged in this 4S battery here. It can essentially go up to 5S, but not 6. So just have a look how fast it heats up. I would expect it, of course, not to be that quick because it's got less power going in. It's only got about 15 volts at this point. It says 16 there in the corner. But that is up in about, I'd say, like 20 seconds or so. Just going to get there. Yeah, so it just means you can use it on the field. If you're at a race event, you've smashed your quad up, you can go ahead and bring something like this to the field and still repair your quad if you get a cable like this. Well, I've got to say, this little thing surprised me. The big deal KAiWEETS were trying to talk about was how quickly it could heat up. Frankly, there wasn't any difference between these two. I timed this at 9 seconds, this is 8 something, but this went up to 400s, this went up to 380. They're about the same, and I don't really think anybody cares between like 10 seconds and 15 seconds, you know, as long as it doesn't take 10 minutes to heat up, you're good. The big deal for me is that it could do all the jobs. Previously, this guy has been great for little stuff, but as soon as I put it on like an XT60 connector on an ESC or doing motor wiring, it fails on me, and I have to break out my big one. This one worked. I have to say, this is my experience. You might be able to get yours to work somehow. And I don't know if it's because Secure uses these little fin tips and KAiWEETS using these big ones. Is mass more important when you're talking about holding the heat? Possibly. It does seem like a very good quality product. I like the way it feels it in the hand. This little silicone thing to hold, as mentioned before, is good. This wire is lovely. It even comes with a little belt to hold it. Isn't that cool? And it's got a top so you can go around with it. There are a couple of things I would like. You know, it wouldn't be bad to have somewhere to keep the tips in some sort of case or something. And I would really like to know what the temperature of the iron is when it's in standby mode. I did talk to KAiWEETS about that and they're quite receptive to it. So hopefully that might happen. But I am talking to marketing people, not the technical people that actually produce it. So that's not a done deal in any sense of the way. But I hope they can do that because these are firmware upgradable. And I realise it's difficult for me to appear objective, because I was sent both this one and this one free of charge for review. But if I had to put my own money down, it would be for the KAiWEETS one, simply because it can do all the jobs I want it to do. I don't need a different iron for doing big things, so a little bit more expensive, but it works. On that subject, they have given us a discount code to bring the price down a little bit, and that's down in the description along with the links to the product. Hope that's been helpful, and I will catch you next video. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.